Hey, my name is Shreya and welcome to More Than Just a Memory. I often find myself opting out of long introductions, so I'm just going to keep this super short and give you the personality of my channel in just 3 words, because I can pretty much sum it up with that. It's impressive. Okay, basically my 3 words are history but fun. And hopefully I can present to you with whatever information you require, and I can do it in the most entertaining way possible, so you're immersed in the stories of the past. Today, to genuinely emphasize the gist of this account, we're going to talk about the importance of history, like who even is she? And why is it important? History is more than just a concrete subject. It takes patience and great comprehensivity. But more so, history is a process to piece together why things worked out the way they did and how it affects future generations. History is basically just solving a mystery. You need to take evidence and find overlaps from different sources to really get an unbiased, accurate representation of what actually happened. Now, let's put your detective skills
to the test.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Guess the Historical Figure. Today we're going to get 2 different accounts, and you're going to guess which historical figure matches with which account. Good luck! Here's your first account. He was a very intelligent and well-rounded man. He had a bountiful amount of followers, and he also intended on educating his citizens, and in doing so, he created a world superpower. He also managed to educate women, and this was unheard of in the past. His ideas were practical in theory, and his thoughts were new and fresh. He helped improve the quality of life for his citizens. And here's your second account. He ruled over his people by instilling uttermost fear. Single-handedly, he was accountable for more than 20 million deaths. He was a cunning man, very manipulative and dangerous, and he intended on having total control of all aspects of his citizens' lives. Thank you for being a participant in Guess the Historical Figure. Who did you guess was being described? Comment below. Believe it or not, both the sources were describing the same person, Joseph Stalin. The first one is a very mild description, kind of emphasizing the better parts of him, the fact that he wanted to educate his citizens and, in theory, improve his people's lives. While the second one shed a bad light on him, and it talked about how corrupt he was and how he wanted absolute control. Neither source is completely accurate, and you wouldn't want to trust either of them, because historiographers do have bias based on their previous experiences and personal opinions. By triangulating our sources, which means to use multiple sources and come up with a basic consensus, which is a compromise between all the sources to come up with the most accurate information you can. Although in reality, when triangulating your sources, you would use a lot more than 2 resources in order to summarize whoever or whatever you're researching, I'm just going to use the previous 2 sources in order to provide a precedent for you, in order to help you understand how to analyze resources. Basically, we're going to come up with an in-between summary that emphasizes both the positives and negatives of Stalin in order to come up with the most unbiased and accurate representation of the man that we can. By using both these sources, I can probably safely say that Stalin, a cruel but intelligent man, intended on educating his population in order to create the best people he could. Although this, in theory, was a very good idea, he did overlay the curriculum with lots of propaganda in order to put himself in total control. This probably is a very vague summary of the man and his achievements and his conflicts. However, it is a more accurate representation of his personality than either of the 2 sources, as we did combine them and come up with a summary that wasn't as biased as either of the sources. Of course, it would be much more helpful and much more accurate to do more research and combine all the sources you can find and find overlapping information. And so when you are actually researching, I compel you to use more than 2 sources and find overlapping information, almost like you're piecing together a puzzle. Also, fun Stalin fact. Before Stalin died, he had locked up most of his doctors, and he was just sitting there dying. And all the doctors who weren't locked up were too scared to treat him, so he died. Ultimately, the point I'm trying to make is that when you're trying to understand a historical event, it's important to have case studies and really use all the resources and evidence you have available. Don't just focus on big names, but also read about the people who led insignificant lives, because this way you can get the perspective and understand more than just one level of the event. And when it comes to you analyzing an event and coming up to your own conclusions and drawing your own opinions, you get the most unbiased opinions you can, and you can decide for yourself what you believe. Of course, this all leads to a very compelling question. Why do we even bother? There's the obvious answer, so that history won't repeat itself. And I know for a fact that I used that answer for more than 7 years of my life. On the first day of history class, our history teacher always asks us, why do we study history? Why is it so important? And I always raise my hand feeling super confident, and I go, so that we don't make the same mistakes over and over again. And of course, that's an accurate answer, but we cease to see what's right under our noses. History shaped you. Everything you do, everything you believe in, everything you identify as is shaped by the past. Historical events gave your ancestors, gives you, and will give your future generations their personal and cultural identities. So there's this thing called transgenerational trauma, and this is where a person's trauma gets passed on to their future generations. To have a more specific example of this, we can take a look at Holocaust survivors. If somebody survived the labor camps, they probably have certain habits that ascended from such traumatizing and horrible events that happened to them in their lifetime. For example, somebody could have the need to consistently restock their cupboards even though they're completely full, because they knew what it was like to have nothing, and having something at hand gives them the feeling of safety. And this habit, to varying degrees, could be passed on to future generations and doesn't only affect their lives, but affects the lives of so many other people. Now ask yourself, how does the past affect you as a person today?